I'd like to welcome to the stage Kurt Crummy. Kurt Crummy is the leads the experience design practice at One Method and is working on an agency transformation project to ensure they integrate and get the most out of generative AI tools across the organization. And we ask all of our guest speakers to just give us some fun facts. And so we have some fun facts from Kurt before we get started, just to help provide some context and framing around his talk. Kurt once owned a local meat distribution company. Given the nature of where AI is taking us, this may be a really helpful backstop for you, Kurt. He was once attacked by piranhas. I'm not entirely certain if those two things were related. He's also been renovating a house for over 7 years, but we probably shouldn't ask him about that. So we will keep those questions out of the chat. We're thrilled to have him with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kurt Crummy.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to come out this morning. Might be a little early to discuss the brand-pocalypse, but I don't know. We're gonna do it. So let's just jump into it. As they mentioned, I work at One Method. We're a design and experience agency, but we have a long history of experiments. So we've launched restaurants, clothing companies. Most recently, we've launched this thing called the Combine. It's like a mixed use, like retail / social / office / event space thingamajig. You can check it out at the combine.io, I think. And we've done a bunch of other stuff that didn't go very well, so we don't talk about those things as much. But way back in the day, we were already getting suspicious about AI and automation. Back in like 2014, I think, when the clothing line first started. And so we made this chart trying to think through like what might happen as that took off. And I just wanted to share it. I think it held up pretty well, actually. So these were our guesses for where things were going. I'm pretty sure next year, if we haven't already, we're going to have AI designed clothing. And we probably have, but maybe a bigger splash one. So yeah, it just holds up pretty well, but it made me start thinking about, how we've been thinking about tech evolving, how it's been evolving, all that kind of gear. And so when I was putting this together, that was kind of where I wanted to start. And I was thinking about how historically, when a world-changing technology shows up, we tend to overestimate its impact in the short term and then way underestimate it in the long term. So for example, when cars first came out, they were probably seen more as a curiosity. They were unreliable, expensive, and broke down. But pretty quickly, people started to pay attention because they were comparing it to horses, and you could just go faster. You could didn't have to stop and rest and feed and sleep. You could just keep pouring gas into it, and it would keep going. But the focus was always on the immediate and obvious applications, speed, getting me from here to there, and comparing it to the horse, which is how they did it before. What they weren't thinking about were like that cars might reshape our cities, that we would invent the suburb, that we would cover the landscape with roads and highways, create millions of jobs. I think I looked and it said roughly 3% of the GDP of planet Earth comes from just automobiles. Roughly 15% of global emissions comes from cars, trucks, and buses. This is one product. So these are the second order and third order effects that are really hard to see at the beginning. Computers, same idea, right? When they first started, we knew there was a lot of potential, but it was mostly focused on science and engineering applications. And then somewhere along the line, as they got smaller and more powerful, somebody got bored and decided they wanted to play a game. And obviously that has continued to go. And then somebody was like, hey, maybe this would be good for business. I don't know. And that started to take off. And then things started to get really crazy. Then we started using them for special effects and bringing things from your imagination to life that just could not have been done before. Sometimes I just like to watch stuff. I've seen this presentation practically several times. But we can't dilly-dally there. And then, we literally put a supercomputer in everybody's pocket. The original iPhone came out in 2007. In 16 years, it's gone from being this is amazing to this is everywhere. And it simultaneously connects us to our friends and families and loved ones in amazing ways. But it also, maybe we now have screen addiction and teen depression and things that are being exacerbated by it that, again, you couldn't have foreseen. Certainly not in the 50s, maybe not even in 2007. So these second order and third order effects are always there. And now we've got AI, and trying to figure out what that might bring. I'm assuming that most people on this call, are probably pretty interested and pretty well versed in this. So we're not going to spend, I didn't want to spend a lot of time, but I was the first up. So I thought maybe just to make sure we're using the same vocabulary for this. Obviously today we're artificial narrow intelligence. It's AI that does one thing pretty well. Midjourney makes images. Then we've got AGI. There's no really universal agreed upon definition of this. I think it's fair to say it's just a synthetic version of the human brain, or us. We have no idea when this could be coming. Could already be here in secret, could be 20 years from now. There's no real agreement. A lot of people have strong opinions about it, though. And then there's artificial superintelligence. It's something that's even beyond us. And again, there is no real agreed upon idea for what that might even look like. So that's great. Way back to ANI, which is what we're talking about here. And it's been around for a long time in different forms. Evolutionary algorithms, used for modeling complex interactions, example in aerodynamics labs. Swarm intelligence for traffic patterns. Fuzzy logic. If you have a thermostat at home, it doesn't know, what the R value of the insulation in your walls is, doesn't know the square footage, doesn't know if you got a window open. So it just has to try and guess how long it's going to need to run a furnace or an air conditioner to get the temperature to what you want it to be, and to stay there for long enough that you feel like it's working. So there's definitely a lot of fuzziness happening there. And then, of course, machine learning. And this one is very much the focus these days. And this is a very broad category. Obviously, underneath that, there's a lot of different things. We're not going to get into that too far, but big things that are coming out of it that people are paying attention to, the LLMs like ChatGPT, which are great at matching patterns. And I know I'm very much oversimplifying here. But again, I think it's important to remember that that's the foundation. What sorts of answers would people be likely to produce to a question that looked like this? That's what we're asking it in some ways. And obviously there's a lot of different methods that they're using to try and make that more accurate, but that tends to be why they're, very good at doing summaries and high-level descriptions and not so good at specific facts. I once asked it what the largest hippopotamus ever caught was, and it was very convincing. It's Mr. Beast, Nigeria, 1961. Told me the weight and everything, and there's no Mr. Beast. It just totally made that up, but it's pretty good at it. And then the other big thing that comes up a lot is these latent diffusion models, starting with a pattern of random noise, mashing your inputs together and then arguing back and forth until we get a distribution that resembles what the target is. And if you want to know more about that, the answer is math. I tend to get in over my head with this stuff pretty quick. But earlier in the year, when these things were first really starting to gain a lot of public notice, given who we are and how we tend to approach things, our first instinct was like, all right, let's run some experiments. Let's see what we can do with these things. Do we even still have a business, or are we just going to be, going back to our hobbies and other things for livelihood? Now, if you've ever eaten, if you live in Toronto or you live in a couple other cities, I can't remember which ones, you've eaten at a La Carnita restaurant. That was a restaurant that was invented here at One Method. Originally, going back before there was a restaurant, we would have these events and pop-ups, and this is a picture of the line, I think, at what used to be called the Toronto Underground Market one night. And it was really fun, food trucks and catering concerts, but even before that, it literally started in our office kitchen. And we were selling tacos out of the office, which super illegal. You're not allowed to do that because the kitchen probably wasn't particularly clean. So the way we were getting around it at first was we had a logo called Meathead. And what we would do is we would go work with local artists and say, hey, can you do your version of Meathead? And then we'll sell, 5x7 postcards of this. And then we'll just give people 3 tacos as a parting gift. And so that sort of got us started, but obviously that didn't last too long. So when we were experimenting with AI, we thought, oh, this could be a fun thing to do. We'll just let Midjourney be the guest artist and see how that goes. And really quickly, we were really impressed with the results. If you're familiar with it, there's some tells for some of them. You can see the top row, second from the left, where it says non-calia or something. Those aren't words. So like there's certain little things you can tell, but honestly, I made a lot of these and I can't remember for sure which ones. And I was here when we were handing out the art. So right out of the gate, we were like, wow, this is everything it promises to be. This is incredible. Oh boy, we could be in trouble. And then we tried it on some client work. One of our sister agencies, Narrative, I think they have KFC as a client, and so we tried to give that a shot, and we were like, oh, that is less awesome. It's a little terrifying, and we quickly understood what the limitations were in terms of control. That for something more open-ended, like an art project, it was working great. For something more specific, and this is going back quite a ways. Might be Midjourney 4, or might even be one before. I can't remember. But certainly before we had a lot of the tools and techniques we have right now. It is advancing bonkers fast. Anyways, we kept using it, tried on a whole bunch of stuff, and we had some successes and some failures. You can see in the Golf Buds thing, Audi doesn't make a car where the logo is on the bottom of the hatchback that closes. So it's not really their car. And there was Photoshop work still required to composite these things. But we were able to do concepting really fast and at really high fidelity. And that's one of the places where we first realized, oh, this is actually really powerful. So this is a real thing that, again, Narrative did for KFC. I forget what it was called. I think it's called Buckets for Life. But they said they built a basketball court under the Gardner in the Beltway Park, I think it's called. And that was great, a big success. But to launch that, they had to send an idea to the client first to be like, hey, this is what it might feel like. And looking at what you just saw versus this, that's a big stretch. It doesn't really bear a lot of resemblance to it because they're just searching for like light inspiration pieces of images that already exist. So we ran with that again and took a different designer who hadn't worked on it and told them to try and envision what it might look like. And they came up with some really cool images that are much closer to the reality. Now, again, there's still some Photoshop compositing happening here, but we quickly realized, wow, like that's not the actual, court in an underpass, but it's not too far off. And it definitely helps you envision what you might want to do. So that was really powerful and we were pretty excited about it. And that's when we kind of started to change our mindset about what these things are, that it was augmentation over replacement, and that these tools work best when we took a subject matter expert, whether that was a designer, a developer, a writer, and we worked with them to figure out how to leverage AI to do things they couldn't do before or to do them better. And so once we realized that this was something that we wanted to help augment everybody across all the different agencies, whether it was design, PR, or advertising, then we had to figure out, well, how do we get people to use it? Because there's still a lot of apprehension about these tools, and a lot of people were worried about being replaced, and fair enough. So we started doing some training. We set up free accounts for people to use, and so that everybody was being able to play with them. We threw an early version of Claude into Slack as a bot. We did a bunch of stuff, but we also wanted it to kind of be fun. So we started doing what we call these AI art battles. So anytime we had an event or party or anything like that, we would just set up a couple of machines already logged into Discord. And then we had a list of topics that were pre-generated from ChatGPT, and then we would give them to two people and they could just go nuts for like 5 minutes to try and create an image for the thing that they wanted to do. And they were really fun, actually. A couple of these, just so you get a sense. This was Werewolf Wedding. We had Alien Karaoke. Zombie Yoga. I don't know why they're underwater, but it's cool that they are. This is one of my favorites, Penguin Heist. Very different feels, from Marshmallow Skies. There's still a ton of room for individuality in these things, obviously. It's still so open-ended, but This one was very hotly contested, Invisible Bicycle. I'm very much in the left side camp, but it doesn't matter. It was really fun, and it has been working. So we're getting people using it. We're getting people who didn't sign up in the first round for accounts coming and asking, can I get in on it now? And it's really kind of, we got about across all 4 divisions. I think we've got maybe like just shy of 200 people. And I would say it's probably 80% of them are in this using it with paid accounts on a regular basis. And even more people are still just experimenting on their own with free accounts. So that's great. And then we started thinking, well, again, how do we take this further? What's the next step that we can go beyond what we've done so far? And so we decided to take one of our coworkers, Jamie Kaiser, and make him an official AI co-pilot. And so this is just something I'm putting out there for, depending on what type of place you work at, the size and resources. Like Jamie made this little model of himself using Allura and I think Stable Diffusion. But Jamie's job is to research new tech, new things that come out, help try and keep us up to date, because it can be like a full-time job just keeping up with this stuff. But also to join projects, to do things that other people couldn't do, or to help them get better at doing the things they can. So it's an interesting role. We're still kind of figuring it out, but it's going pretty well so far. One example is, maybe you've seen these. If you kind of squint at this, it might look like it says obey. It's this generator that can, drop memes in, put messages and things. Can make something look like something else. I like this guy. It used to be more complex to do. Now, of course, there's one you can just go to Hugging Face. It's called, I think this one's called Illusion Diffusion. But again, really quickly, within, I don't know, an hour or two, he's able to take our logo and then drop it into this and make all these different things where we show up in it, which was, again, just a kind of a fun effect. But it's this setting aside some time for just pure fun R&D that I think is helping us get everybody caught up more quickly and more interested in this topic. So I think that's something worthwhile for a lot of organizations and groups of people to think about. Then we also did this. We made an AI bartender. We did it for, I can't remember. Oh, I think it was actually for FITC opening night party. We had Luigi AI. We have a bar in the office called Luigi's. I got a little video about it. I'll let it do the explanation.
Neural net, backward chaining, cognitive computing, chatbots, machine learning. Artificial intelligence can feel scary. It's doing a lot and evolving quickly. But can it make you a drink? Inspired by our bar, Luigi's, we created Luigi AI, an AI-powered bartender. It creates unique drink recipes based on your name, our supply, and the internet's imagination. We started by MacGyvering a Raspberry Pi, ChatGPT, and some random office supplies. The tool analyzes usernames and our full-bar stock, and in milliseconds prints out an entirely original, deeply personal, surprisingly thoughtful, generative cocktail recipe. New tech means change, but change can be fun, and it can make you a great cocktail. So to our new robot sidekicks, cheers! Cheers!
Yeah, so that's Luigi AI. We can't even totally agree on how to pronounce it. It could be Luigi. I'm not really sure. It works pretty well. Once in a while, you get a bad one. Max, who's the managing director of One Method, he got his cocktail was called the Maxed Out. It had gin, vodka, rye, tequila, bourbon, and some crap in it. It was not a good situation. But most of them were actually pretty good. And some of them had great names. I think mine was called like the Croomy Breeze or something, I forget, but it's pretty fun. We still got it set up, and people do use it from time to time. But what we figured out again from that was just there's these new possibilities, things we couldn't really do before. For us to write an application that would have done that, been very time consuming, and it wouldn't have been as good. So we've started to realize what these things are, and I would say they kind of boil down to these three rough categories of enablement, things you couldn't do before; novelty, things that you couldn't do and maybe you wouldn't have done, but now it's easy and kind of neat and you can do it for the first time; and analysis, which is one of the places that are harder that we're starting to work into. And obviously some of the challenges with hallucinations and things like that make that tough. But that's where we are, and that's kind of where we've gotten to. But looking forward, so when we're thinking now about, I know you were promised a brand apocalypse, so how are we getting to that? If you bear with me, you remember the Air Canada Centre, around for a long time, and then the naming rights changed, and it went to Scotiabank, and then they contacted us to help them with rebranding it. So what they ended up doing was creating, if you've been down there, the logo is actually giant LEDs. And if it's the Raptors playing, then it's going to be themed red, and it's going to be showing you clips from what's happening in there. If the Leafs are playing, it's going to be blue. The point is that the logo shows you what's happening inside. And when I first saw it, I was not sure, because I was thinking, well, this is kind of like an anti-logo, guys. This isn't really about the people who spent all this money to put their name on the side. And the team was saying, yeah, but here's the thing: nobody gives a shit whose name is on the side of a building. They care about the thing that's happening in the building. That's what they're excited about. And to me, that was a really good creative insight. That if you wanted to get that positive brand association, the best way to do that was to associate it with something that people actually care about. And so I think this was a really successful project. And if you walk by it and you see that it's blue, the Leafs are playing, and you don't want to try and drive on the Gardner that night. But it made me think about creativity and what that really means, because as people who make things, that's how we set ourselves apart. It's either we sell our time to produce it, or we make products that are creative and we sell those. But what is it? Is it the deliverables that we make in the end? Is it just the ability to, come up with a unique product concept, or write good code, or make a beautiful image? Like, what is it? If we sell it in some way or another, it'd probably be good to understand what it is and be able to explain it. And then how does AI fit into that? So we already see this explosion of complexity in the world of marketing. There's fragmenting channels and like never-ending new tools, and everyone's focused on really short-term metrics and results. It's already complex, and then we're going to add AI into that mix. And just AI, tends to act as an accelerant for anything. So it's just exacerbating those complexities. Fun fact: I just put those words of like increasing complexity in the marketing, fragmenting channels, blah blah blah, into Midjourney, and it was like, oh yeah, I got you. Giant oranges exploding, a sea of milk in your kitchen. That's what it thinks that is. I do kind of love just the random shit that comes out of there sometimes. But anyways, for designers, we're seeing massive copyright issues starting to go through the courts. We're seeing the democratization of design, with people suddenly being able to do this who couldn't do it before. Make assets they couldn't have made. I made this in, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes. And it's not great. It wasn't a new idea. I just tried something that I'd seen to see if I could figure out how to do it. And it was really easy. So going forward, don't have time to hire a photographer? No problem. Don't have time to hire a developer to write you custom code? No problem. Like, these things were kind of, rearing their heads, and there's no real agreement about what's happening. If you look in the media, you see this: artificial intelligence will replace half of all jobs in the next decade. Well, that's a guy who is a VC who invests in companies that are trying to replace half of all jobs in the next decade. And like I said earlier, our experience didn't bear that out. AI is dumber than a dog. This is from the head of AI at Meta, somebody who probably doesn't want people panicking about AI as they bake it into every product. This is my favorite one. AI could turn a calculator into a supercomputer, solving 1,000,000 problems at the speed of 1,000,000 cheetahs. That's from the AI hyperbole generator. I don't know if it's true, but I do like the concept. So I think this highlights this problem right now that we're seeing of what is AI in terms of like productivity tech versus creativity tech. And to do that, we have to define what those things are. So creativity, we've talked about. Productivity, I think that's what you're reading about the most often, which makes sense. The companies that are working on these are engineering and technology companies. Productivity is going to be high on their list, and it's an easy place to go to. The stories written in the media tend to be written by people who are talking to these companies. They're looking to attract business audiences, people to invest. So you can see kind of why that would be dominating the discussion. But they don't really get into specifics. It's always just faster, and sometimes when they do, it gets a little silly. I've seen articles talking about, oh, great, you can use ChatGPT now to write you really professional sounding emails. You just tell it what you're trying to get across, and it'll give you an email. You can send that out. And then I've seen other articles, right after saying, good news, you can finally use ChatGPT to summarize all those long-winded emails you get and tell you what they're talking about. So I think it's a fair question, like, is putting AI in the middle of two people to expand and then recompress their communication a productivity gain? Probably not. I recently saw some advertising agency talking about this hellscape future they called infinite marketing. It was the ability to use AI to go romping through everyone's personal data and then create a never-ending stream of content just for that individual. And I mean, I'm sure that to a very small subset of people, that sounds great. To me, it sounds like kind of a worse version of this. And that's because, again, if you think about our good friend Paul Rand, who is a famous designer, if you're not familiar with him, used to say, good ideas rarely come in bunches. And so I think this narrative of productivity is almost a distraction to some degree, and it kind of misses the point. But that doesn't mean a lot of folks aren't going to take up the call and give that a try. So as we were talking about earlier with cars and computers, let's just assume that, yes, AI is going to supercharge productivity. And what's that going to look like in practice? And I would say that the first thing we can count on is an explosion of output. A friend of mine was recently having lunch with somebody who worked some startup that they were using kind of a spray and pray approach, and he was using some AI tools to just generate a bunch of content marketing automatically. And I think he was ending up paying like a dollar or a few dollars per article. And he published one while they were having coffee. Is that great content? Not really. Is it going to work for them? I mean, maybe, and it's early days. So I think another thing that we can probably anticipate is an increase in what we call blands. It's just a lot of things that are being driven together, design that offends no one, ideas and products that are obvious. And there's already a saturation in those places. I think you're going to see more convergence. We have lots of examples of this. When we're being driven, everything's being driven by an algorithm. If something worked, do it again 50 times and see how that goes. You're going to see more homogeneity, more skepticism, things that's already obviously a big problem. There's an election year in the US next year. It's going to come up a lot, I think. There's a blogger, Alex Murrell, calls this the age of average. And I think that, when I was looking at all those things and kind of plotting out what would reasonably happen and is already happening and would just accelerate, it can be a little bit of a downer. But then I realized, those are outputs. That's the deliverable. But we're not looking at creativity. And if you think about what our craft is, that's the big part that results in the output. So yeah, if you're abdicating your craft completely, then that is probably not going to get you very far. I would say more simply, if you're just going to do exactly what you're doing now, but faster, then you're probably doing it wrong. I don't think that's really taking advantage of what can be done. You know, AI gives you the chance to leverage new abilities and create new outcomes. And that's where we want to go. So if we think about what this kind of really means and how do we apply it to our work, okay, we know productivity is dominating the conversation. We know that creativity potentially is, you know, a strength, maybe even a superpower in a world where there's an infinite sea of kind of meh. So in that world, I think brands are going to matter more. They're going to be way more important. And if you think about what a brand really is, it's relevance, it's differentiation, and it's trust. And for this to really work, all three of those have to be genuine. It can't just be, you know, a bunch of skeezy people trying to figure out how to trick you into those things. That might get you somewhere for a while, but the best brands really do try and deliver on those things. You know, if you think about Nike, you know, their core value is that, you know, everyone's an athlete. Just do it. You can just pick a pair of shoes and start running. Yeah, they're selling you shoes, but when you go into a Nike store, they're not going to tell you you don't belong here. They're going to encourage you to make changes. They give out free apps that help you exercise, whether you use their shoes or not. So thinking about these things and the brands that don't take advantage of this and aren't real brands. I heard a good example the other day from, I think it was Seth Godin. He was saying, it was Nike again, actually. He said, if Nike opened up a hotel, I think we could all have a lot of fun thinking about what that would be like. But if Hyatt decided to make a pair of running shoes, like I have no idea what that would look like, because that's not a real brand. Go to any Hyatt, you know, stand on the third floor, take the signs off the wall. I don't know. Are you in a Marriott? Are you in a Hilton? Like those aren't actually brands. They're just logos. It's a commodity that they're trying to sell at a premium by pretending it's a brand. So these things are going to matter more. And this is going to be the path to the winner's circle. And for us as makers, whether it's our own product or whether we're working in services, you know, that's what we do. We build brands. We use insights and strategy and creativity and design, development, and a million other tools. And that's what we do. And that's our craft. So I think it's the solution to prospering, you know, in this coming world. Lame ideas are going to be everywhere. And the people and organizations who think beyond the basics, try to make something that's unique and authentic, that's the path to the winner's circle. And that's why, you know, AI will definitely reshape how we work. It'll change what we build, but it's not going to change why we exist. So I think it's up to us to help whether it's in a product company and it's our coworkers, or we're starting up our own business, or if it's for clients and services, we have to help them kind of understand that iceberg, and that this is the way to get heard now, and this is the way to succeed. Fluff just isn't going to cut it in that world, because you'll be drowned out by an infinite sea of other fluff. So using creativity as part of our craft, that's how we're going to enable ourselves to achieve our goals, kind of get to the winner's circle. And that's it. Thanks very much.
Amazing. Kurt, thank you so much. Just looking at all the chatter going on as you're giving your talk there, I'm not sure you have a chance because you're focused so much on the presentation, but covered so much ground in 45 minutes and left us with some really compelling questions. So thanks for all of that. I do have some questions here. I'm going to lead off with one of my own. Just as like a question, I work in a very kind of a minor version of the world that you work in with smaller brands. And I find myself trying to wrestle with the idea of there are going to be brands and businesses out there where, and I kind of posted this in the questions, but because I'm moderating, I get to take the lowest voted question in the chat anyways. It seems like, you know, I talked about this recently, how AI is like a accelerated or hyper-powered version of clip art from the 90s in so many ways, right? People, I'm sure we remember, I remember clip art and CD-ROMs. I could drop anything. I'm like, great, boom, I got a car on my poster. I'm the most popular kid in my high school. In some ways, you know, while clip art didn't upend the design industry, it seems like, you know, the power of what AI can do for non-designers, and I use that in the kind of friendly, let's say, non-professional, people who are maybe have access now to the magic button that as design community we've always try to encourage our clients to understand does not exist, in some ways feels like it does, which opens up and democratizes that access to a creative tool that may not necessarily be the best output, but certainly for some people will suffice. How do you see creative organizations, creative professionals, businesses like One Method demonstrating value beyond just the fact that that tool can now do what used to feel like a large amount of work, and kind of get to that place where there's still immense value in the creative process beyond just clicking a button?
Yeah, I think there's two ways. The first way that you can do it is that, again, what AI doesn't have is context, right? It doesn't know what you're talking about or what's appropriate or what isn't appropriate, what's novel, what isn't novel. That picture I had of the guy holding up a gigantic fish, I literally just typed in, "You're doing it wrong," and that's what Midjourney came back with. But you still have to have, whether I don't know if you agree with my choice, but like you still have to have the sensibilities to recognize good. And those sensibilities tend to be developed over years of craft and practice and exposure. And so that part hasn't changed. You still need to be able to recognize it. This discussion of like being replaced has happened, like you said, many times before. I remember a million years ago when like desktop publishing came out, everybody lost their minds. They were like, "Oh my God, that's it. Designers are done." And like, yeah, I think we lost the like church bulletin business, but everything else is still fine because you still have to be able to recognize good, to think about a problem that you're solving. It's not just about the ability to be able to draw. Even for someone who's an illustrator, it's not just the mechanics of their craft. That is part of it, but it's more than that. So I think the first part is that, that yes, the bottom is getting better. It always is, but that doesn't equal replacement, because you still need to have other skills that supplement the mechanical part. The second part is what I was talking about, which is that in some ways that actually helps you, because as more and more people generate things without that context, without that ability, then I think that makes the stuff that is really good, especially if you're leveraging AI to do something even further than you could before, that's additive, not just replacing or doing faster. That's again where you're going to stand out. You can use AI to write code, but is it going to know how you should? I worked on a project for a bank once, and like that bank ran on a mainframe, like a legit OG mainframe that was written in a custom language that wasn't documented. And like that's the bank. Like when you get your paycheck, like that is it. It's the bank is right there, and it was ancient. You're gonna point AI at that problem? I mean, like I don't think so. It would take as much effort to understand and explain the problem as it would to solve it. So I still think I just don't see it as a threat right now. I think the only threat I see is people who abdicate to these tools and are just like, "Oh yeah, just do the thing I used to do for me." Well, yeah, eventually they will, and the output will be mediocre, and then yeah, you probably will be redundant. But I think people who are more like explorers and like to play with it, practice it, learn about it, figure out how to leverage it, get more out of it, I think it's going to open up a world of possibilities. Whether you're a big agency, small agency, sole proprietor, product company, I think it applies universally.
That's great. Michelle asked a great question. It's been voted up, and I actually want to ask this of a lot of the speakers today, because as I talk to anyone, especially from the design and the arts community, I work primarily with animators often, and there's a lot of concern around how some of these models have been trained, the copyright. I mean, I think today or yesterday, the Authors Guild went into the actual court for the lawsuit against OpenAI around the copyright infringement they believe was occurring when they trained their large language models to finally figure out how to write George R.R. Martin's last book, which maybe is the only way we'll ever get it. So maybe he should just kind of sit back a little bit. But I'm going to get a lot of shit for that. The question, though, is I think it underlines a lot of these discussions that I've been having. I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. I'm just going to read verbatim what Michelle wrote. You mentioned copyright being contested. How is copyright considered when producing concepts for clients? And are there better generative AI options when it comes to copyright, i.e. who owns what? I think it's really curious because, also working in the IP space with media and entertainment, which is an area I also tend to focus, there's a lot of, wait, are you just taking someone else's ideas now and turning it into something of your own, even if it's an adjacent and it's not an exact match, it's a something in the style of, you see Mobius all the time. It's like, where do we kind of find the ethical boundaries here, or how do we approach that in a way that feels like we're not now just, kind of going over and plagiarizing or whatever kind of version of that might feel like is happening?
Couple caveats. Number one, I can't answer that question, obviously. I can give you my 2 cents, but the answer is above my pay grade, and I think everybody's. These are really complex questions. And number two, this is a huge discussion. You could probably have a conference just on this, but our take and how we've been doing things, we did a few things. One, we put an AI policy in place that said anytime we're going to use it on client work, we have to tell them and disclose that we're going to use it and make sure that they're all right with that. That's number one. So we think anytime you use AI, you need to be transparent about it so that there's no confusion. The second thing we said was that at no point is it ever okay for you to just be like, for any client paying work, to say, oh, I want this in the style of one, and then put in one artist. Because that is, appropriating their work in our minds. You can definitely put in a few different people for us. So if you're trying to do something that's more industrial, you can say like Bauhaus design, Dieter Rams, and like throw in a few different names and ideas. Because my personal opinion on it, and I think generally our belief, is we do subscribe to the concept that everything is a remix, and that we do what we do because we that expression, we stand. I can have my vision because I stand on the shoulders of giants. All the people who've come before us, all the ideas we've been exposed to consciously, subconsciously, I think do add up to our creative ideas. And so, the legality of copyright aside, which is something that is being worked out by experts who, are lawyers and judges, ethically, I think we're comfortable with the concept that if the tool, is legal and we're using it in a way that we don't feel like we're just ripping people off, we are trying to bring our own insights, our own vision, and remixing things in unique and creative ways, that's more akin to the spirit of hip hop, sort of in the early days, is the closest analogy I can think of. And that we're okay with that. And we think that's how all creativity moves forward.
It's a great insight. Someone else made the earlier connection as well, like sampling and mashup and remix culture are things that have existed for over 2 decades, maybe more now. 3 decades. And they found a place, and the people found compensation. A great YouTuber named Cleo Abrams used to work with Vox, did a great talk about how Grimes is approaching things like this from the artist perspective, but also just that kind of fuzzy gray area. We'll move on because copyright in those areas can get a little bit daunting for us. And you're right; it's a day-long conversation, if not more.
One thing I will mention, sorry, one last quick thing is, if anyone hasn't seen it, I think it's an amazing series. It's called Everything is a Remix. It's pretty old. But you can probably still find it on YouTube. And I think it's like a really cool exploration of that topic.
Awesome. I think we have time for at least one more. Ian Hooper has jumped up to the top of the charts today. I wish I'd done my Casey Kasem just now. Damn it. Do you still think there's room for craft in our profession? Or if so, if design is a mixture of craft and creativity, does skill craft go away? And I think you've sort of answered this a bit, but what are the new skill sets? Well, what are the new skill sets that may emerge as a part of this? And this sort of actually is something I was going to ask as well, around these second layer effects you're talking about. I think about people on their devices and, are we going to have a generation of people with neck trauma from looking down so much? Do you have any predictions or any ideas of where these new skills might evolve and emerge? Can you see anything on the horizon, or do you have any kind of insight there?
I think I understand the question. You're just saying, are there any things I can see coming up as a result of AI?
Yeah, and especially when it comes to ideas like creativity and design, the skills, if there's a craft that we need to start nurturing, I'll give you maybe a prompt, pun intended, but learning conversational design. I had a great talk yesterday about the amount of information you need to start now synthesizing to understand how to work with some of these tools. You need to understand camera terminology, you need to understand composition or art history. Have you guys sort of explored or seen any other skills that are starting to emerge that you maybe didn't expect as a second layer effect of trying to design with these tools?
Yeah, I mean, coincidentally, we do have an event coming up called Nearly Now. It's going to be in January. We do it in conjunction with another company called Faculty of Change. And it is literally predictions for the coming year. Did it last year. You can still find it on the Combine website, I think. There's a recording and I think there's a PDF of it, where we do those sorts of predictions. We do a few around AI, but it's so well covered that we try and go a bit broader than that. But we were just talking yesterday, sorry, about some things that we might be looking at for that. And I think that it's not so much that I think there are new skills that are going to be required that are very technical, right? Like there's still a whole world of these tools are not user-friendly, and the parts that are user-friendly are limited in their usefulness. And so there definitely is like a lot of room still for technically minded people to figure that gear out. That's why we have our AI Copilot. But even on the softer side, I think that some of the skills that have just always been good are more like you just need to double down on them now. So depending on what your discipline is, it's developing that sense of good is, I think, a really important skill. Being able to know what good code looks like, what good writing looks like, what good design looks like, why those things are good, working on your critical thinking and problem solving skills, being able to deconstruct what you're doing, why are you doing it, what are you trying to achieve, how will you know when you get there, why aren't you already there, what's stopping you, like all those sorts of things are really important to develop as just part of your intrinsic thought process. I would focus on those types of skills just as it's just like, when Photoshop came out, that's how old I am. When Photoshop came out, there's a tool you maybe guys have seen. There's the dodge and burn tool, and the burn tool looks like the hand. The dodge looks like a lollipop, because in a dark room, that's how you did it, right? You would block the light with your hand and burn in the spot you wanted to, or block it with the lollipop thing. And same with desktop publishing. All these things, all computing is based on metaphors and analogies to the real world for the most part. Maybe not all, but a lot of it. So understanding core fundamental skills, to me, is always the best strategy for future proofing. You become a master at Stable Diffusion, great, until that sucks and something's better. What's better, I think, is to develop those core skills, and that, the tools to use these, it has to be both. The mechanics are part of it, like we've discussed. But if I was going to over-index on one part, it would be the core fundamental things: problem solving, recognition of good, communication, emotional intelligence, those sorts of things where AI is weak or non-existent. That's where I would be focusing. Does that answer your question, trend-wise?
Totally. Did you see me writing notes as well? This is great, because it really does seem to be the tools are starting to take some of the things that we maybe have thought of as necessary and said, actually, maybe they're not as necessary, it's exciting and interesting, because it maybe opens you up to, someone talked about removing the friction between the idea and the execution. And a lot of these tools are allowing for that. But I think maybe this kind of points to where we are 30 years in from Photoshop, because I think this is the 30th anniversary, where some of those fundamental foundational skills that you're talking about still are just as critical as they were 30, 40 years ago. And I go on Twitter and I'm inundated with, this technology is going to put animators out of business. And you look at it, you're like, yeah, I mean, on its face, it looks cool. But underneath it, there's still so much that's required. Now we need to identify that. That's what I'm hearing you say, is like, we need to really call those skills out and start training for them, or thinking about training ourselves around them, so that they're not just intuitive, but maybe they're more managed and something that we can grow.
For sure. When we hire designers, I usually don't care what they use. I say, oh, I'm Figma, man. I'm all about Figma now. I hate Sketch. Okay, great, whatever. I don't really care. What I care is, do you have strong rationales for your design? Are you a problem solver? Do you have good taste? Can you move between different aesthetics? Do you understand those aesthetics? Like, those are all skills I care about. And if you don't know how to use Figma and we use Figma, or vice versa, or whatever it is, cool. I'm sure we can solve that problem. But that whole column people put in their resume, sometimes you see it more in juniors, which I get, and it's fine. It's not a detractor, but they're like, I know how to use Office and Photoshop and After Effects and all that. I'm like, cool, but like, let me see your portfolio, and then I'll know what you know how to use. And I assume you can use a lot of the tools, and if you can't, we'll work on the tools. But I want to see who you are and what you're adding to this creatively, or intellectually, or technically.
Yeah, that's great, Kurt. We're out of time. You've been amazing as a kickoff to this conference. A lot of really juicy insights. Hopefully everyone's been taking notes. The chat has been off the charts. So I think that's a measure of a job well done. So thanks for your time this morning. Hopefully you're going to stick around.